Welcome to the Polite Conversations podcast, where every episode is focused on civility, decorum, and good manners. And I'm your lovable, non-controversial host, Ina. If you know me, you know I definitely don't like to ruffle any feathers at all.
Hello, dear listeners. Oh, what can I say? It is yet another helpless day of this horrific Western-backed genocide. I tried to think of a less depressing title for this episode and really couldn't, considering the subject matter. I know it's hard to think about and talk about these horrors, but really I think it's the least we can do. Keep talking about it. Everyone needs breaks. I totally get that. But we can't pretend it's not happening on the whole. I know there are some people who have completely tuned it out. I really don't think that's the right thing to do here. The one thing that keeps me sane is actually using my voice and my wallet to express as much opposition as I possibly can to these atrocities. I hope that you too are raising your voices in your circles and questioning the products and content you support. No amount of anti-fascism or leftism or progressivism will matter if we can't speak up about our countries and our tax dollars supporting and enabling an ongoing genocide. It's just become so blatant now what's happening. It's hard to understand how there can be so much silence in the Western media. I know I've talked about this several times before, and it really shouldn't shock or surprise anyone at this point just how complicit Western media is in all of this. It should be a case study for decades to come. It truly is appalling and chilling to see just how willfully blind they can be as this all unfolds in front of them. Palestinians are being death marched right now, en masse. Leave or die. We've gotten to the point where even the former deputy head of Israel's National Security Council, I just saw today before recording this, he is calling for Israeli soldiers to defy orders to ethnically cleanse Gaza, to refuse to take part in this war crime. I mean, we're at the point where even Israeli officials are feeling like, this is kind of fucked up. We might get in trouble for this shit. Of course, he's saying this now at the final steps after so much slaughter and ethnic cleansing has already taken place, not out of the goodness of his heart and empathy for the Palestinians, I'm sure. It's because he fears the position Israel is backing itself into. On Twitter, he wrote, and I'll link to the full thing in the show notes, but here's a quote. Netanyahu and the October 7th government are turning Israel into a leper state and are bringing themselves and the officers and soldiers of the IDF to the cells of the accused in The Hague, Brussels, London, and many other capitals of the world. This must not be allowed. Well, I, for one, hope they get what's coming to them and are held accountable for their hundreds of war crimes that have already taken place way before he wrote this. Anyway, it's against this horrific backdrop that Netanyahu's Likud party has just held a conference openly calling for, shouting, and singing about the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. It's already underway, and they are celebrating pretty fucking publicly. Senior cabinet members of the party in power, Netanyahu's party, used this ultra-nationalist conference titled Resettling Gaza to shout their intentions. I mean, you don't get more blatant examples in history than this. Ben Gvir and Smotrich were both in attendance, of course. I mean, where else could we possibly see a country be so bold as to be on trial for plausible genocide and also openly hold multiple ethnic cleansing celebrations while they deny they are doing any such thing. In 2024, there's only one such openly, boldly, proudly maniacal nation at this time, the ethno-state of Israel, emboldened and supported and funded by its powerful sugar daddy, the US of A, of course. They are completely out of control, drunk on power and violence, and they show no signs of slowing down unless they are made to. They're moving on to Lebanon using the same exact playbook to murder civilians and bomb hospitals. They've normalized bombing hospitals, for fuck's sake. Like, that's not even shocking to anyone anymore. They just have to claim there's something underneath it, give no proof, and bomb the fuck out of it. This truly feels like an alternate reality where some ISIS-like group has been backed by all the most powerful countries in the world and are now free to oppress, murder, and rape their way through the region with the most sophisticated and powerful weapons available, where they are free to expand their theocratic ethnostate and demolish world history at their whims. Except ISIS was universally condemned and recognized as a terrorist group, not supported and given a pass to do as they please. Their caliphate was not internationally recognized and was not given diplomatic cover. The media did not spin things in their favor. We are living in some really bizarre times. If you live in the West and have not yet had a serious "are we the baddies" moment, after everything we've seen this past year, like, what are you even doing? Here are some shining examples of the things I've seen in Western media just in the past couple of days. First, there was BBC Question Time, just asking questions 1 year into this very visible and public genocide, framing the entire conversation around it as, the precise wording of the question was, has Israel gone beyond self-defense? I mean, this is utterly unhinged framing that can only happen if you're blind to the endless massacres of innocent Palestinian civilians, children, and wanton destruction of civilian infrastructure, purposeful, annihilation of healthcare, of food, of bakeries. You could have asked this question a few days after October 7th last year and been able to say, yes, Israel has already gone way, way beyond self-defense, very clearly, and point to lots of examples why. But a fucking year later, it is disgusting and obscene to even ask this. I don't know how they do it. This stuff will be on record forever. Oh gosh. And then there was a CNN puff piece on how sad all this killing is making the IDF. It's not easy doing genocide, It's giving them PTSD. I mean, look, I'm certainly not one to make light of mental health issues, but if it's mass murdering babies that's fucking you up, I don't feel very sympathetic. That article gave a content warning about there being mention of suicide among IDF soldiers, but none about the fact that about halfway through the article about this soldier who has taken his own life, you learn that he had driven a fucking bulldozer over hundreds of Palestinian civilians while they were alive. There was also mention of how difficult eating meat had become for some of them after seeing all the blood and guts exploding. Just insane. Western media has fucking lost so much credibility. It is wild and very, very tragic. Quite literally a "won't someone please think of the baby killers" article, shamelessly published in CNN. Then, oh my fucking God, there was the recent New Yorker piece, an interview with novelist and ridiculous Zionist Howard Jacobson, a British guy who's argued very publicly that it's a form of blood libel against Jews to simply report on the Palestinian babies that Israel is killing. I cannot understand how anyone could make this argument once even, let alone argue for it in multiple publications. Firstly, there's the completely shameless disregard for the lives of Palestinian children. Just an utterly selfish and disgustingly narcissistic perspective where one manages to make themselves a victim in a story about thousands of murdered children. Then there's the horrific and dangerous conflation of Israel and Jews that we see Zionists do time and time again, trying to tie all Jewish people in with this genocidal state murdering children. It's just so offensive. An insult to victims of actual blood libel, where false accusations were made up to fearmonger and dehumanize Jews, saying that they would use the blood of Christian children in religious rituals. Like, that was fabricated for the purpose of dehumanizing a group. You cannot use that to shield Israelis who happen to be Jewish, who are actually currently murdering children in the thousands. It's a ridiculous attempt to weaponize anti-Semitism. Their Jewishness is not what anyone reasonable or decent is outraged by. It's the murdering and the genocide that's upsetting. And finally, there's the fact that this viewpoint has been published at all. Like, at all. It's beyond parody. It's utterly depraved. In a media climate where journalists are being told to not use the words genocide or Palestine, there are fools like this getting platforms to spout this rubbish. Unfucking believable. This is the stuff we're seeing in our most moral Western media, reporting on the most moral army in the world, from the most moral democracy on the planet. I mean, I guess they're doing their job, right? Which is to support and justify the genocide. Speaking of utter freaks getting platforms, Douglas Murray has been living out his violent, genocidal fantasies to the max, hanging out with the Israeli Diaper Forces. He got a chance to rub one out right on the chair that Sinwar was assassinated in. That's going to be in his wank bank for years to come. Jokes aside, though, there's something really disturbing about the fact that someone who is basically a white nationalist with a posh accent, someone who has been desperate for a race war for as long as I've been familiar with him, someone like that is being legitimized and laundered through this genocide. We live in a society that not only rewards that kind of extremism if it's dressed up right, it allows someone like Douglas fucking Murray to gain fame, fortune, access, and proximity to the murderous violence against minorities that so excites him. It's sick. That said, there is one piece of media I'd like to take a closer look at with you, and that is a 1-minute, 50-second clip of Douglas on Fox News sniveling about Ta-Nehisi Coates, who, by the way, has really become one of my favorite people these days. He is someone who clearly understands the magnitude of the moment and what it could mean for all our collective struggles as the West lets the world and any pretense of equality, morality, or human rights go up in flames. So let's dive into that.
Ta-Nehisi Coates has written...
Ta-Nehisi Coates. Can't even bother to pronounce his name properly. I've never heard it said with a Z or Z sound. Like, we know he can make an S sound, so why not make that effort? We should start pronouncing his name. Douglas.
Ta-Nehisi Coates has written one of the most racist books of our era.
When he says he's written one of the most racist books of our era, at first you're like, what the fuck is he on about? But if you've been online enough, you've come across these types. He sounds exactly like those white nationalists that go around using neo-racism, which is a term you would have heard in the online new atheist scene too. A term which literally was always used to describe anti-racist people, trying to co-opt racism as a term for themselves. Actually, the real racists, the neo-racists, are the ones who are anti-racism. Those who criticize white people and Western society too much. Because, the only real form of racism that's left now is anti-white racism. Only according to the most lunatic nutjobs in this part of the world. But of course, if you have a posh enough accent like Douglas or a good thesaurus like Sam Harris, you can get away with people believing you are respectable intellectuals and not basically Alex Jones or Richard Spencer. Even if your points are similar and the same kind of anti-minority fear-mongering underpins your entire body of work. I mean, to say that Ta-Nehisi Coates has written one of the most racist books of our era is incredibly rich, coming from someone who's written books like The Strange Death of Europe, which has literally been recommended on white nationalist reading lists, praised by Viktor Orban, for fuck's sake. Then we have his recent posh white nationalist screed titled The War on the West, in which he often repeats white nationalist talking points that wouldn't seem out of place in the Daily Stormer. So how can he sit there with a serious fucking face without a shred of self-awareness on his smug, snivelly little face, complaining that someone else, let alone an acclaimed anti-racist, has written one of the most racist books of our era? It's just so transparent that in a very Israeli manner, he's just inverting reality and simply stating the opposite of what's true. In truth, it's Douglas who is beloved by every racist in the West. He provides cover and legitimacy to some of the most extreme sentiments in these parts of the world. Rhetoric which can result in race riots like we saw happen in the UK earlier this year. The truth is that he cannot even tolerate a mild opposition to or critique of racism. And so through that lens, Douglas sees Ta-Nehisi Coates' criticism of the racist structures in Western societies, the framework of colonialism, as extremely threatening to his worldview and racist towards the people who are doing the most racism and benefiting from it. He simply can't have that. And of course, that is not what the word racist means. You simply can't co-opt it and use it in whatever way you want to because it makes you feel good. But that doesn't stop Douglas. Okay, so we're still only a few seconds in, 7 to be precise. This is a 1 minute 50 second clip in total, and I've already had so many things to say. All right, let's continue. Please subscribe via patreon.com/nicemangoes to access the extended version of this episode.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support it, there are several ways you can do that. You can share it online, talk about what you just heard. You can leave a 5-star review to help others find it too. And you can also subscribe via patreon.com/nicemangoes. No E in mangoes. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter before it's completely wrecked, you'll find me at Nice Mangoes. Again, no E in mangoes.